Hello, FedPhoenix fam. So, I've been debating making a video about this because even though it's a very relevant issue, it's certainly one that I had done a video on years ago, long time ago, um, on my personal social media page, and I was not as I had really underestimated the level of sensitivity I needed to show in reference to certain people. And this created a huge hoopla, stir, whatever. I ended up just taking the video down. So I don't want the message or the information to get lost in, in the sauce and the devil's in the details, right? So I live in West Virginia, which is, number one per capita in the country for opioid abuse, opioid overdoses, all that kind of stuff. So in my area particularly, we frequently hear about drug busts and about overdoses, and people can't get ambulances because the ambulances are tied up Narcaning people and different things. And there's a lot of new rehab centers being built, and what people say is that a lot of the residents are kind of bussed in or flown in or whatever from other parts of the country, and the ones that don't successfully complete or drop out or whatever stay in our area, and just really exasperating the issue, and so on and so forth. So people love to do this thing where when a person is actively in addiction, right, and they're breaking into houses, or they're committing crimes, they're racking up victims um under their circumstance. During that time, right, when the person is doing whatever that's negatively impacting the community, people love to really kind of do this thing where they're like, oh, lock them up forever, put them in prison forever. And as a person who's been incarcerated, as a person who's had loved ones incarcerated, as a person who lives my life day to day with some level of trauma, I guess, for lack of a better term, that I will one day be incarcerated again, even if I'm doing nothing at all wrong. A phobia of that almost. Phobia is a little extreme, but you know what I'm saying. I certainly know and understand all too well that incarcerating a person for a month, a week, a year, 6 months is an incredibly long time in that person's world, regardless to any other, factors. And it's incredibly small time in the free world. And it's people in the free world who determine how long a person spends in prison. So when people who have never been incarcerated, or have only done like little overnight or weekend, little county bids, go, oh, put them in prison forever. It really shocks me to my core, because I understand what 1 year, 2 years, 5, 10 years, what this means for that person and for everyone they love. And most often, the crimes that are being committed by these people under these circumstances do not justify anything more than maybe a 6-month prison stay. And I mean, that's honestly pushing it in a lot of cases. But then we also have the flip side of this coin, right? Where there are drug busts, and it's like, oh, and what's crazy is like the drug bust will be like, oh, we had one recently, and it said something like the guy was from like Cleveland or Columbus or Cincinnati or something. But anyway, it said this guy, he's a gang member, and was busted with fentanyl and this and that, and arrested on trafficking charges. And then when you read the article, the amount of drugs he was busted with was like 2 point something grams. I don't know about you, but if you're a dealer, and the amount of drugs that can be proven that you were dealing, or in the process of dealing, is literally not even 3 grams. I mean, I get that fentanyl is real powerful stuff, and I get it's a nasty problem. I wholeheartedly get that. And and I'm not trying to minimize that, but that's really not, that's not even a really notable, so-called bust in my personal opinion, just looking at the numbers. But I think it was because the person was from out of state, and because the person was a person of color, And because they were caught with drugs, and the belief is that, because I don't think they've been convicted of anything yet, but the belief was that they were going to sell those drugs. It really kind of, it's almost like the local media is wanting to fuel this stereotype that drug addicts, and this is a thing that's kind of perpetuated in my area, right? Is drug addicts are these local people, who are like most locals, a lot of locals, I should say, downtrodden and kind of victims of circumstance who happen to fall upon being drug addicts, right? And why they're drug addicts, they have a mental condition that dictates their actions, and therefore, eliminating all or some of the responsibility of their actions. And the drug dealers are these people from out of town, out of state, from bigger cities, violent people, predatory people. And it's crazy because there's just a lot of mess there, a lot to unpack. And I'm going to try to make this video short because, again, the devil's in the details, and I really want the overall message to be the important thing. So when this happens, right, like this 3-gram bust, that people got all excited about, and one lady even said, "That's right, get the drugs off the street and flush them." And I commented, like, really? That's what you think our water table needs? We have an insanely high per capita rate because of the C8 and the pollution, but you think we should flush some fentanyl and add that to the water table? Like, make it make sense. I mean, people lose their minds with this kind of stuff. And really, a lot of people make no effort to educate themselves at all about any aspect of it before coming to these very inflated, dramatic opinions. But so here's my thoughts. So when this happened, again, the conversation stirs back up amongst myself, people I know, myself and strangers sometimes, especially on the internet. When I'm like, well, listen, and there was another bust recently too, where it was like 6 or 7 people were arrested, a mishmatch variety. And really, judging by the booking photos, I would say all of them could have been addicts. According to the article, they were all also selling drugs. That's very common here, that people are kind of both. But and I don't know if that's common throughout the rest of the country, because I've kind of been in West Virginia for like 15 years, and I'm not as in touch with things outside of here. But and when people are like, yeah, to put him in prison forever, yeah. And then someone else was like, oh, 7 less drug dealers. That's woo, that's helping solve the drug problem. The war on drugs, we're winning it. And so I made the comment, as I often do on these things, that it is really basic economics, right? It is just fact that if 50% of all the local drug dealers today go to prison, are arrested, leave the state, go to the other, move to California, whatever, if they just disappear, and 50% of the drugs go with them, that's not going to help our opioid epidemic for any more than a few days. And that little bit of that few days where it's not quite what it normally is, after that few days, it's going to be way bigger. And the reason is it's simple supply and demand. If there is a demand for something, and you remove half of what is available, now the value of what is left doubles. So what does this mean? This means that the drugs that aren't seized, because, this is a seizure, it's not like the ones that weren't taken, all the other stuff still out there, increases in value. So this means that addicts need to do a lot more to come up with the money to buy them. So this is going to mean a spike in general crime, petty theft, identity theft, whatever people do to support the financial burden of a drug habit. And what also is going to happen is word's going to get out. Not that, one guy from the city got busted and 7 locals, or mostly locals, got busted, and now there's less drug dealers. Ooh, don't you come around here selling that mess. That's not the message that's going to get out into the world, because that's not how anybody who understands economics is going to look at it, especially if they have a stake in this. They're going to look at the value of these said drugs has now doubled in this area if you've removed half the drug dealers, right? So the drug dealers got to do, or the addicts, the people who commit crimes to support their habits, have to double down on their crime now because they need twice as much money for the same amount of dope. And now you're sending out a loud and clear message to all the surrounding states and everyone who keeps up with these things. Not that, don't come here because you might get arrested, you might get caught. It's, hey, guess what? Not only those drugs that used to be worth 3, 4 times more in small town West Virginia than they were in big cities and Philly and Jersey and, wherever, are now worth 8 times more because there's not enough supply for the demand. If you're a drug dealer, if you're a person who's selling drugs on the very low street level, which is exactly what all these people are, and so it's all about making the most profit, off your product, as quickly as possible. Like with most business models, for lack of a better term. So if I was a drug dealer, which I'm not, and I have not engaged in the sale of anything even remotely in that lifestyle, and almost 20 years, maybe probably about 20 years, almost 20 years. In spite of the fact that I did go to federal prison for a non-violent victimless drug crime, but that is apples to oranges, not really relevant. But I'm sure someone will feel a need to bring it up. But no. So, but if you're a person, think about this. If you're a person who's selling drugs, so you know that what you're doing, you're risking your freedom, right? You're risking your safety. You're kind of putting a lot on the line to make some money here, and you're making fast money, you're making big money. If you find out that you can hop on the highway and drive 1, 2, 3, 4 hours away, sell the same amount of product, the same exact product that you have right now, and get 4 times what you're getting, 8 times what you're getting, are you going to stay where you're at, or are you going to come here? I mean, it's not rocket science. So when I say this to people, when I say that putting more people in prison, especially, the dealers, which are, people have this, a lot of people locally, who've never known people personally, really, particularly those who've ever sold drugs. A lot of people have this idea that this drug dealer is this predatory, villainized, whatever. And the way to resolve the opioid crisis is to put them all in prison or give them such extreme prison sentences that it will somehow just scare everyone else from coming. Let me tell you something. During Prohibition, it was illegal to sell, make alcohol. People still did it. In fact, the less it became available due to the seizures and all that, and the higher the demand went up and the higher the price went up. So the more appealing it was to people who would do it. And the fact that people weren't just going to prison, people were getting killed. People were getting, it wasn't, times then were not what they are now. There was not a video camera on every cell phone and all this kind of stuff. There was a lot less accountability. So for people who wanted to rob, the bootleggers and the agencies, we shall say, who targeted them. So it was nothing for, not only for them to lock these people up, but it was also nothing for the bootleggers to be found, in the woods somewhere, with a bullet in their head. And so it was a much more dangerous game, in some ways, in the current dope game. And that never stopped anything. It did not. And the more that was seized, the more people, manufacturers that were shut down, the more distributors that were shut down, the more the appeal to go into this line of work, presented, because again, supply and demand, when the demand stays the same and the supply is lower, now the value of the product greatly increases, okay? So when I tell people this is no solution, actually, if you understand the economics of supply and demand, if half the local drug dealers all just disappeared or stopped selling drugs or whatever tomorrow, we would attract 3 times more drug dealers to replace them, because there would be a period of time where the value of the drugs would just shoot through the roof astronomically, because of the limited supply and the demand being what it currently is. So then people go, oh, well, you're so smart, aren't you? So what's your solution then? What's the solution? And here's my thing. There is no flip a switch overnight solution. If there was, it would have already went into place one way or another. There's not. Like most things, like the failing public education systems in many places, like the just a lot of the various systems in this country. There is no immediate, flip the switch solution. Just like a lot of nearly any major issue that we face, there is no just click the finger, boom, here's the solution, let's do it. No, it is a systematic or multi-step situation. So when you ask me, what is my solution for the opioid crisis? First, I would say we need to legalize marijuana. And I know you're thinking, how does that make any sense? But let me explain it. So in West Virginia, medicinal marijuana has currently been legalized with a $200, $100, whatever you got to pay online card, to give you the privilege of buying it. And because it's not hard to get the medical card because it covers such a broad span of medical issues. It is still recreationally illegal. Now, if we look at states that have legalized marijuana on the recreational level, medicinal and recreational, because of course medicinal should always be the priority, then what we find is that these states make a obscene amount of cash in the tax revenue from these sales. So they have the money to improve their school systems. They have the money to create larger safety. That's one of the many things. So what the multi-step plan I'm going to propose to you is going to involve a need for cash influx, someone who's going to fund different things. And that is what the recreational marijuana is, what's going to fund this plan, the strategy that I think would work or do a world of good. So now the medicinal marijuana, here's another thing we need to do. Right now, most reputable doctors in my area will not prescribe you medicinal marijuana. You get the card offline that says that you qualify, or you find a local doctor to say you medically qualify. You basically pay a fee for the privilege of being able to get recreational marijuana. And then you go to dispensaries. So, but most reputable local doctors will not say that you have a legitimate medical need for marijuana. Will not prescribe you per se marijuana. And that's because there's so much stigma locally attached to that as well. Crazy, I know, in this day and age, that anyone would stigmatize marijuana of all things. Not as much tobacco and alcohol, but marijuana, which is incredibly, incredibly safer than the other two options, the other two things. But so if we remove that stigma, if we lighten that stigma, and we encourage doctors, if you're dealing with someone who has chronic nausea, if you're dealing with someone who has moderate pain, I know with some severe pain, there really is no choice for at least periods of time for a person to go on opioid-based pain medication. But quite often, with moderate pain, and non-opioid pain medication, you can manage that without having to dab into the opioid crap. You know what I mean? And you're probably thinking to yourself, well, why does it matter what doctors prescribe? We're talking about drug dealers and, a lot of the stuff that people get, the random pills and whatnot, because that's a thing too, are from people who get prescriptions from them from doctors. And I know that some of those people, when they can't find people to buy the pills from, individuals who they know have prescriptions, what they then will do is buy them off the random drug dealer per se. And then they're getting pills that are pressed, is I guess the term. And a lot of them have like fentanyl and stuff in them, and they will kill you. So you're thinking that you're just buying from the guy at the store, some pain meds, some anxiety meds, for whatever reason you can't actually get prescribed to you. You go home and take them and you don't wake up, and your kids find you in a position that no child should ever find their parent. So that's a piece of this. That's one of the moving pieces in the opioid epidemic and the drug crisis here. So we remove the stigma, or lighten it to our greatest ability, against marijuana in general. We encourage the prescribing of medical marijuana in place of controlled substances where appropriate. And then we take the funds, particularly from the tax money of the recreational marijuana, to fund further phases of this. So that's the first thing. The marijuana is our buddy in fighting heroin, fentanyl, meth, all that. The marijuana is your friend in that fight. So that's number one. Number two. So a lot of people I've heard say that they wanted to get into drug rehabs or, whatnot. And there's a wait, or there's no beds, or you got to get, shipped to another state. And then when you complete the rehab program, sure, you can go to, 12-step meetings, but there really aren't a lot of, there are halfway houses for people coming out of rehab, integrating back into society. But the resources are very limited, from what I understand, for a lot of these people in a lot of these positions. And certainly I would imagine that if a person is overcoming drug addiction or fighting a drug addiction and they're sober and they're trying to stay sober, what is not beneficial to them is unnecessary stress, to their sobriety. What would be beneficial is, having the availability of resources. job training resources, trade resources, housing resources, that kind of thing. Clothing resources. I mean, I could go on for days, but you get the drift. And again, that's where that recreational marijuana tax money can play a part in transitional resources for persons going from active addiction to getting clean and sober to trying to create a life where sobriety is something that is attainable for all people, something that is feasible, something that is not more difficult than it has to be. So, and then, because whoa, we ain't done yet. Then, I personally don't have any beef with a person who sells a unregulated product. And if you say, well, that product kills people, I can tell you, in my 40 plus years of living life, for at least 30 of those years, I've known many people, not so many now. I don't think I know any. As a matter of fact, I know I don't know anyone now, but I've known many people, who have sold unregulated goods, and y'all know what I'm talking about. And many of those people were doing it to survive. Many of those people were, doing it because, when you've done that to survive, and then you get a little bit older, a little bit more advanced in life, and you learn you have other options, right? You learn you can get a 9 to 5 and whatever. Chances are at that point you have little to no education, because the time you should have been spending in school, you were out there making money to feed yourself and your siblings. And you were making lots of money real quick. So then you get into a point in life where, okay, now you don't have the same responsibilities that you had but should not have had, perhaps as a child. And now it's about you sell unregulated goods because, one, it's what you know, right? And two, why would you, how can a person go from, who's already been taking, throwing rocks at the penitentiary, go from making their own hours, their own days, their own schedule, that kind of thing, and making a very lucrative income, to making pennies on the dollar, working a 9 to 5. And again, you probably have little to no traditional education at this point. A lot of people at that point don't even have GEDs or diplomas. So we're talking, you're going to go flip burgers, and someone is going to probably talk down to you and condescend you, and the customers are going to treat you like dirt under their feet for pennies compared to what you could be making just doing what you already know how to do. And as an adult, throughout life, particularly, in the last, probably 15, 20 years, when I come across people and they're from that environment, right? And, they're very frustrated, and they want what you and I want. Here's the thing, the human experience, and you really got to watch my video on the human experience to understand where I'm coming from on this, but we're all humans. The drug addict, the drug dealer, the person whose car just got broken into by the drug addict, the person who is putting a $20 bill in the donation pot to the family of the drug addict who now has to bury that person. All of these people are people. And all of these people at the end of the day want the same basic things. They have various ways of pursuing them. Some of them are very counterproductive. Not all these people are good people, but certainly most of them are not bad people per se. They're probably just decent people. They're not particularly good or particularly bad. They're people. They're people living like we all live. So, but when I see people, particularly, in the last, definitely the last 10, 15, I would even stretch it to say maybe 20 years. When I come across, especially young people from disadvantaged situations, and they're very frustrated and overwhelmed, and they're like, I don't know how my life can be anything different than what my mother's life was, what my father's life is, what everyone around me's life is. And a lot of these kids, and when I say kids, I'm not just talking, 12-year-olds, I'm talking 20-year-olds. But when I see these kids, and I try to tell them, you can go to college and get a degree, and because you're poor, because of your economic status, you can get student loans and grants. The grants you don't have to pay back, but you can get student loans and grants. This will give you a little pocket money to help you survive, through your education while you're working part or full-time somewhere, because you're not going to make a lot of money doing that, working a regular 9 to 5, most likely. But you can get your college degree without spending next to anything out of pocket up front. And what happens is after you get your degree, and you can get those loans deferred for a little while too, kind of push back, but then you pay your student loans. And yes, it's a high interest trap that a lot of people get stuck in. It creates a lot of debt. But all the people that I've heard complain about their student loan debt are people that got their degrees, are settled in their careers, are progressing upwards. And I got to tell you, I'm positive are not doing or selling unregulated goods. And in my mind, that's a win. That's an improvement, over the options of not getting your degree and not having a career, not pursuing that. And, it's the same thing with trades too, and I tell kids about Job Corps. Those of you who don't know about Job Corps, please look it up. And when I say Job Corps, it's JOBCORPS. This is a free, understand what I'm saying, cost-free program. If you are a person between the ages of 16, and I think it's 24, it might be 22, but I think it's 24, who comes from economic difficulty or is in a state of economic difficulty, there are Job Corps all over the country. And what these places do is they will house you for free. Now you're going to have rules because you're under somebody else's roof, but that's such a minute thing that you really got to get over yourself if that's going to stop you. But they're going to house you. If you don't have your diploma or GED, they're going to help you get it. A lot of them will help you get your driver's license, free driver's ed for you. And they will help you get a trade. And if you succeed in finishing the trade program, a lot of times they will give you tools or equipment you need to kind of break into your trade. And if your trade is a labor trade, electrician, plumber, whatever, a lot of times they have union ties and they'll get you, OSHA certified, all that kind of stuff. Or if you want to do HVAC or whatever, and they can get you an apprenticeship a lot of times with a local union where you live. And let me tell you, that is this is lining up your career for the rest of your life. And yeah, you got to get your education. You got to start from the bottom like everybody does. But ultimately, you're in a position to make dang good, very good money, very comfortable upper middle class money. And if you play your cards right, even own your own business and perhaps do better than that. Maybe break through the glass ceiling and go beyond stable middle class, lower middle class, upper middle class, to upper class, to someone whose family goes on vacations twice a year in really nice places. Something that your parents and your grandparents and their parents and so on and so forth were a lifestyle they were never able to give their people. You can change that. Job Corps is a great way to get some footing to as a catalyst to make that your reality. So, and I'm saying that to say, we need to provide support resources for people wanting to come out of drug addiction and wanting to stay sober. We need to provide economic and educational opportunities, or at least make aware, make a greater effort in making aware the educational and economic opportunities to those. And this could not only prevent or minimize those who go down the path of being drug dealers, but also drug addicts. A lot of people I know who have been in addiction and are currently sober did not come from privilege. Some did actually, but many did not. And a lot of them feel that a lot of the pressure or the circumstances that led to their choice to, their choices and being an addict at a certain point were economic. They were financial. And they were largely about the frustration and lack of hope and lack of resources that they knew of. And when I tell these same people, when you were a kid, you could have went to Job Corps. When you were a kid, they have grant programs, for you to get your CDL. And a lot of companies, I think Swift does it. I think US Express, I'm positive US Express, or at least they used to. But there are a lot of, and this goes for girls too, because I know some lady truckers, and they are getting the shmoney's, you know what I mean? And it's a great field to go in for a career. But, there are even trucking companies who will pay for you to go to CDL school. Of course, that's usually with the condition that once you get your CDL, you work for their company for 6 months, a year, 2 years, whatever. But you're not an indentured servant. You're not working for free. You're making good money. And people don't know about these things. And I really make it a point when I see young people, especially if they seem uncertain, or if I know they don't come from a very economically blessed situation, I make it a big point to tell them everything I can think of as far as FAFSA and CDL school and, and Job Corps and just all these things. There are nursing homes. If you want to be a CNA, there are nursing homes, and I think even some regular medical facilities, like hospitals and clinics and stuff, that will pay for your education. Pay for it under the condition that you work for them for a period of time once you get your credentials. And again, you're not working for free. This isn't like an apprenticeship. This is a real job. So basically they're saying, not only will I pay for your education, but I will line up your job afterwards for you. I mean, you can't go wrong with that. And I think this is a lot of the issue. I don't think this is a one and done. I don't think this is a fix-all situation. I don't think if we legalized recreational marijuana and removed the stigma and our local physicians pushed it where appropriate, and we took that tax money and we created resources for those wanting to become sober or stay sober, or for those wanting to remove themselves from economic hardship, because that's certainly a big part, especially here in West Virginia, for a lot of folks, whether it be, with their drug addiction, with the fact that they were selling drugs, with the fact that they were an addict who was selling drugs, or selling drugs and became an addict, or whatever. A lot of the underlying issues that create these monsters of a situation is economic and resource based, and some of it's education based. And I say education based because, like I said, I'm really kind of taken aback by the fact that so many young folks have no clue in the world about the options that are that are in the world for them, where it doesn't matter how much money you come from. It doesn't matter if you're living under a bridge or out of the back seat of your car. There are opportunities that for you to get where you need to get and get what you need to get, to have a career, to have options, to have an education that aren't going to cost you money up front. And most young people I've encountered in the last, 15 plus years, maybe 20 plus years, have no clue about these things. When I tell them about these things, a lot of them they're like in awe. They're thinking like, well, what's the catch, And there is no catch. You don't have to, in order to live your life, you don't have to enter adulthood under the premise of, I come from nothing, I have nothing, and there's nothing for me. Whatever I'm going to have in this life, I have to just somehow acquire with no resources, no education, and I need it like yesterday. So it has to be big money, has to be real quick. Because that big money, that real quick money, honey, a lot of folks start out as drug dealers and end up becoming drug addicts. A lot of folks do drugs recreationally and think that they got under control and become drug addicts. A lot of folks need to make large amounts of money very quickly to survive, and they sell dope. Unregulated goods is what I'm trying to stick with here, but I keep going off script. But anyway, and they sell unregulated goods as a solution, or at least a temporary solution, right? Because most people I know that I've known throughout my life who hustled, their plan was not to hustle for the rest of their life. Their plan was, once I get my car paid off, and once I get, my family comfortable and a few months of bills paid up and some money put aside, then I'm going to start, I'm going to get my barber's license. And of course they think they got to pay for all this. Got to get my barber's license. I'm going to get my barber's license. I'm going to open a barber shop, or I'm going to get my beauty license and open a beauty shop. And then I can leave that behind me. But life happens, right? You pay off the car, and then all of a sudden you have some other unforeseen expense. And how are you going to school to get your certificate or your license and any freaking thing when you're on call 24/7 selling unregulated goods? And not to mention, if this somehow all worked to plan, when it comes time to put up that cash, right, to rent this space for 6 months a year, to have your business, to spend tens of thousands of dollars on equipment and all these things, do you not think the IRS is going to flag you like a jet plane taken off from the tarmac? Abso-freaking-lutely. And then guess where you're going? Probably at that point, federal prison rather than state. A lot of people find themselves in a bind, and they think hustling is a temporary solution. And for some people it works out, but for a lot of people, you get what I call the fast money disease, right? Where even when you try to break away, you're like, I'm not going to keep risking my freedom. I'm not going to keep, and then you try to do different things. And the amount of money and the amount of control over your own life you can have selling unregulated goods, which I'm not, you know, condoning that, but I'm just saying, to put things in perspective, compared to flipping burgers. It's hard to imagine that anybody chooses to flip burgers in that situation in spite of the risks. And so my thing is, we need to spread knowledge of the resources that are currently available and expand some of those resources, which again, recreational marijuana tax money, which I also think should help with seniors in schools and stuff too, don't get me wrong. But right now, the big Achilles heel of society where I live is the opioid crisis. So I feel like that should be a definitely a priority issue. But we need to create a situation where there is education about resources available and how to utilize them, to young folks. Start young. People my age that are still, out selling unregulated goods, they're too old for Job Corps. And I'm not saying it's a hopeless situation. Some of these people, they turn their lives around, they get their CDL. They turn their lives around, they go to college and utilize the FAFSA. I'm not saying it's a lost cause, because I don't believe in that. I don't believe people are a lost cause unless they choose to be. And I think that that's a choice that can be changed at any time as well. But if you really want to put a dent in things moving forward, not just the current situation, but moving forward, I think a lot of that needs to be educating young people on resources. It may be expanding some of those resources. It may be creating transitional resources. Also, if you're a person especially if you're a person who has been convicted of a drug, or selling unregulated goods, when you come home from prison, a lot of times you're in the halfway house. Sometimes, you max out and you're kind of just home, or you're on the street or in a shelter. And again, back to the wall, a world of not only mental health issues and social issues and way huge, deeper issues than money, but on top of all that crap is that now you suddenly need to, pretty expeditiously come up with enough money to get a vehicle, enough money to get an apartment, enough money to convince your loved ones who haven't spoke to you in 5 or 10 years because you've been in a cage for 10 or 15, to try to make amends to them and rebuild those connections. And a lot of times money is involved in that. And I'm not saying you can buy people's affections or their sincere caring, but I'm saying when people make amends for their absence, a lot of times there is a financial piece to that. And you definitely don't want to return to your loved ones after having done a long time in prison, particularly if relationships have become strained or non-existent, with your hand out. Because one, they probably aren't going to give a crap, and they're probably going to go, oh, here's this person who can't get their life together. Now they're out of prison. They're still the same, worthless, whatever. But also, you want to have some pride and some dignity, and you want these people to respect you. And unfortunately, a lot of the time when we assess how much another adult is worthy or not worthy of our respect, of our consideration, we look at things like their economic status. We look at things like, are they stable? We assess, is this person trying to just get something from me? Like, does this person need something from me? Or is this person really just here trying to build a tie with me because they have nothing to gain other than the fact that they want this tie with me? They want this connection. So there's a lot of moving pieces to this, folks. And there is no quick solution. And I don't believe in vilifying, former addicts, current addicts, people who sell unregulated goods. I don't vilify people. I think that as a human being, and particularly if you're a person who believes in karma or juju or God, whether that's Christian, Jew, Muslim, whatever, because I know all these religions fairly well. I think we almost have an obligation when we're faced with a difficult circumstance, particularly a circumstance that involves us to assess and develop some opinions about people that we don't personally know. And this is triggered by the fact that our society, our communities are being harmed by them, which of course makes us concerned for ourselves and our families. It's natural to go on the defensive. It's natural to just kind of want to point a finger and, oh, they need to go to jail. And, there was a thing years ago that West Virginians used to say, some of them, not all West Virginians are like this, but would say, shoot your local heroin dealer, which again, economics, that actually would exasperate the problem greatly. Not to mention, as a human being with a conscience who's not a sociopath or a psychopath, the idea of just going out in the street and just randomly shooting a stranger, killing a stranger, because they're part of a stigmatized group, or they're in a stigmatized situation, even by their own choice, is really not something I'm okay with morally. I think that if you believe in karma, or if you believe in mercy, if you believe in things like humanity, or in a merciful or forgiving God and gods, whatever, at the end of the day, when you encounter these situations, you almost have an obligation. If you truly put your moral beliefs above your personal ego and kind of your knee-jerk reactions to things, if you actually assess things, you almost have an obligation to say, why is this the way it is? What is the issue here? What is the underlying, situation? And what can we do to change it? Because as much as I want for myself to be happy and safe and comfortable and stable and not have to worry about my car getting broken into at night, I want that for you too. I want that for you too. And I want that for the various strangers I encounter day to day, and the various strangers I hear about and read about on the internet, no matter how negative a light they're painted in. Unless you are someone who hurts children, or deliberately goes out of your way to prey upon the elderly or hurt animals, or something that's just beyond my comprehension. Unless you're one of those... Sorry, the cat is messing. Gotta get him. Buckley, no. Get down. Sorry. But unless you are truly one of the monsters among us, and even then, I guess people can change and they can redeem themselves. I've just not gotten to a place in my own character development where certain groups of people, I can hold the level of empathy that I probably morally should hold towards them, and I'm working on that. Like, that's not something I'm just like, it is what it is, But yeah, I think we owe people. We owe, because we're all in the human experience together, whether we like it or not. And I think punishing and harming and trying to just erase individuals because their presence or their conduct is inconvenient is not okay. It's not. Hitler did that. He found a group of people that in his mind were the problem in his society, and his idea was just erase them all. And I could never sleep at night knowing that I would be part of such a monstrosity. And I think when we take groups of people, and people who aren't harming other people, right? Who are not maliciously, intentionally going out of their way to harm others, and we villainize them, we demonize them, we condemn them, and that's not okay. It's just not. But anyway, I digress. This is a really long video. I wish I knew how to crop it down, because I would, honestly. One day I'll learn how to edit videos, I promise. But my Cash App will be in the description. As always, if you'd like to donate to the channel, my email will be in the description if you need to contact me for any reason, as will a link to my merch line. As you guys know, I'm working on my first book. I should have that out hopefully the end of this coming summer, beginning of fall. So I'll keep you guys updated. So no matter what you're going through, remember, it is just a slice of your life, and you will get through it because you have to. And I would love to hear your perspective or your feedback or your opinions if you've actually watched the whole video. So you actually know what's been addressed, because some people won't. They'll watch 5 minutes and go on a rant. Because, let's respectfully back and forth, discuss this, because this is a real issue that affects all of us. And as a society, we have to heal ourselves.